situation is. Other than being in the midst of war, Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, other than being under surprise attack from an enemy, I don't ever remember a more dire situation in the Holy Land since 1948. From David Friedman. David Friedman was the former U.S. ambassador to Israel under the Trump administration. He is right-wing, and I believe he's a friend of the Prime Minister. And yet, here's what he says. Given the striking parallels between Israel's current internal rift and the infighting that caused the destruction of the Second Temple 2,000 years ago, why would Israel, the Israeli government, proceed with its judicial reform bill on the eve of Tisha B'Av? Very bad timing. Okay, there's a lot in there you might not understand. What is Tisha B'Av? It is the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av. And we're not actually on the eve. I think he means it's this week. It's in the next few days. And it is believed by the rabbis that the reason that the Second Temple was destroyed on this day, First Temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, Second Temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, and Jewish people fast and pray and mourn on this day. As a believer, the reason the temple was destroyed is because the Levitical system was no longer needed in light of the high priesthood of Melchizedek, Yeshua, that his blood shed, and it was the once for all time sacrifice. Nevertheless, 40 years later, judgment comes, and the temple is destroyed. The Jewish people are scattered, and the rabbis said it was because of sinat chinam. What does that mean? Baseless hatred. You had the Sadducees, you had the Pharisees, you had the Zealots, the Essenes, and they hated each other to the point that the Zealots were actually killing other Jewish people who would not fight against the Romans. In fact, there's a very famous rabbi by the name of Yochanan ben Zakkai. He is the father of rabbinic Judaism. What Judaism is today is because of him. And he went to the Zealots as they're preparing to fight against the Romans, or fighting against the Romans. And he says, you're not going to win this battle. You're going to lose. It's a hopeless revolt. And they said, okay, fine, we're going to kill you. They were going to kill him. His disciples snuck him out of Jerusalem, hidden in a coffin. He survives by going to Emperor Vespasian, gives him a dream, says, I had a dream that you're going to be the next emperor. Just let me survive. Don't kill me. Let me go down to Yavne, half hour south of Tel Aviv, and continue Judaism. Because of that, the Jewish religion survived. The point is that the Zealots were no more. The Sadducees were, every other group was pretty much, became extinct, other than the Pharisees, Yochanan ben Zakkai, and Messianic Jews continued to be a people for about 300 years into the 4th century. The point is this, is that there was hatred between brother against brother, sister against sister. There was murder, brother against brother. And listen, Israeli leaders have gone online and talked about civil war, talked about people fighting in the streets. Now, I can't believe that's going to happen. What am I talking about? Why is this a big issue? Why am I talking about the 9th of Av? Why am I talking about baseless hatred? In Israel right now, there is a very controversial legislation, and I'm going to tell you right now that I personally am against it. I want to be really careful here. I am a Messianic leader in Israel. I do not represent all Messianic leaders. But based on my discussions with my friends, most of the leaders that I know are against this. Our government right now is the most right-wing government in the history of the country, the most religious government since 1948, also in the history of the modern nation of Israel. And they want to pass legislation that would that would all but declaw the Supreme Court. Now, let me explain something about Israel. We don't have a constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and we also have what's called the Basic Law, which is based on the United Nations, basically human rights. So if our Knesset, if our parliament passes something that our Supreme Court believes is not in parallel with our Declaration of Independence, or not in line with the basic human law, they'll strike that down. And so the Knesset can then, rework it, try and pass something else. And what's happening now is that our Knesset is trying to pass a law that would take away the Supreme Court's ability to overturn a law. You say, well, Ron, they've been elected. That is that's the government. The problem is that while they did run on a platform of judicial reform, most Israelis are for some judicial reform. No, I don't want to say no. The vast majority of Israelis, about 65%, are not against declawing the Supreme Court. We want to see balance between the two powers. But I don't want to get into the politics of it all, because this is spiritual warfare. Right now, let me just tell you what's happening. This is how upset Israelis are over this issue. Just a few days ago, tens of thousands, if I have the numbers right, marched from Tel Aviv all the way to the Knesset in Jerusalem. Right now, there are tens of thousands of Israelis demonstrating outside of the Knesset. From what I understand, 10,000 or so army reservists have said, if this law passed, we won't serve. And hundreds of IAF pilots, Israeli Air Force pilots, the most elite Air Force in the world, they're saying we are so upset about this law that we're done. We will not be in an army that is going to be part of a dictatorship. I do have a concern that if this law is passed, that there could be a perpetual religious right-wing government that you'll never be able to get out. Normally we go back and forth, but Israelis are concerned. They are concerned that this could turn into a dictatorship. Talk about the only democracy in the Middle East. By the way, that is why Western leaders are very upset with Benjamin Netanyahu right now. That is why it took President Joe Biden. Again, please forget right-wing, left-wing American politics or international politics. The fact of the matter is that, again, in my opinion, Israel needs a Supreme Court. There does need to be reform, and most Israelis are for reform, but the way they're going about it is that we now have a government that has radical elements inside the government, and you're saying, wait a minute, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is an historic figure. Listen, you need to pray for Prime Minister Netanyahu right now. As we're speaking, he is in the hospital, as I understand it, getting a pacemaker. About a week ago, he fainted in his house in Caesarea. Initially said it was dehydration, but there was suspicion that it might be more than that, and the doctors put in a heart monitor for a few days to see how his heart's doing, and now they've decided they need to put in a pacemaker. Look at all these things that are happening at the same time. Now, again, please listen to me. Yes, I, Ron Canner, have a political opinion about the situation. Throw that aside, okay? If you're saying to me right now, Ron, no, I agree with forget all that for a minute.